Individuals as inadequate as you are unworthy of triumph. The message invaded my personal communication device precisely as Fernando Verdasco was poised to secure the championship at Court Suzanne Lenglen. I go by the name Lucas Sterling. At the age of 41, I had just received notice of my termination through a text message while enjoying prime seating at the French Open finale in the heart of Paris. The notification originated from Gavin Barclay, my direct supervisor at Innovatech Solutions, a technology consultation conglomerate situated in Dallas, where I had dedicated the last 8 years of my professional life as the chief strategic innovator. 8 years invested in nurturing professional liaisons, procuring clientele, and generating income that sustained the profitability of our European sector. 8 years marked by missed familial gatherings to accommodate discussions with directors stationed in Berlin and Rome. 8 years of unwavering fidelity to an establishment that had unceremoniously discarded me akin to a disposable item. I fixated on the display for approximately a dozen seconds. The surrounding spectators erupted in jubilation as Verdasco secured the decisive point, yet everything seemed indistinct. An immediate follow-up message materialized. Your employment is terminated. Remove your personal effects from your desk by the forthcoming Wednesday. Devoid of a formal discussion, meeting, or explanation, it was merely a craven manner of concluding someone's professional trajectory, whilst they were partaking in what ought to have been a commendable and deserved excursion. I had merited this Parisian sojourn through the acquisition of our most lucrative client agreement in the corporation's chronicles, achieved 10 months prior. Novacor Industries had formalized a 4-year compact valued at $15 million in consultation fees. Gavin had personally entrusted me with the Roland Garros Premium Pass during our quarterly summit, expressing congratulations before the collective team and recognizing me as the embodiment of international business evolution. Yet here he was, engaging in digital communication, resembling that of a juvenile terminating a romantic affiliation. The individual occupying the adjacent seat in the privileged section of the grandstand cast a sideways glance. He appeared to be in his late 50s, adorned with an opulent timepiece and exuding a composed demeanor that suggested familiarity with distinguished environments. His countenance seemed vaguely recognizable, yet I struggled to place it. "Is everything satisfactory?" he inquired in a subdued tone, his enunciation possessing a distinctly Australian inflection. I scrutinized him with greater precision. Recognition struck me with the force of a glacial wave. Alastair Humphrey, the Chief Executive Officer of Stellaris Enterprises, our foremost competitor within the European technology consultancy arena. We had exchanged pleasantries during a conference in Vienna 3 years prior, an encounter I recalled vividly, particularly given our company's relentless efforts to divert our clients for the better portion of a decade. "Merely professional matters," I articulated, concealing my cellular device within my pocket. Nevertheless, a visceral intuition suggested that this specific juncture held far greater import than a mere severance from employment. Gavin Barclay had unwittingly committed the most consequential blunder of his career, and he remained unaware of the ramifications. The timing could not have been orchestrated more favorably. I had single-handedly cultivated Innovatech Solutions' European undertakings from inception. Upon my initiation 8 years prior, we lacked any international clientele and maintained no presence beyond the geographical boundaries of the Dallas metropolitan jurisdiction. Gavin had deliberately engaged me to rectify this, promising stock options and partnership opportunities that never came to fruition. My expertise lay in enterprise software deployment, yet I possessed an innate aptitude for comprehending the distinct operational modalities of European enterprises compared to their American counterparts. I dedicated 3 years to mastering both Spanish and Italian, embarking on ceaseless expeditions and fostering rapport with technology executives spanning across 13 nations. The consequential outcomes were self-evident. Over the span of 8 years, I had garnered 51 key clients with a cumulative contract valuation of $89 million. Our European sector now comprised 43% of Innovatech Solutions' aggregate income. Gavin had perpetually felt menaced by my accomplishments. He epitomized the archetype of a director who asserted credit for every triumph, while disassociating himself from any adversity. When Novacore Industries initially repudiated our proposal 20 months prior, Gavin openly attributed it to my supposed deficient comprehension of cultural subtleties. Yet, upon my subsequent successful re-engagement through a revised methodology, he informed the board that his visionary guidance had been pivotal. The harbinger signals had progressively accrued for several months. Gavin discontinued my involvement in senior leadership assemblies. He engaged his nephew, Theodore Barclay, as the assistant director of European affiliations without soliciting my input. Theodore possessed negligible international acumen and was monolingual in English. He was, nonetheless, family. 3 weeks antecedent to this juncture, I discovered that Gavin had been partaking in client engagements that should have been channeled through me. When I confronted him about this transgression, he asserted he was optimizing channels of communication, and that I ought not concern myself with affairs beyond my hierarchical rank. My spouse, Evelyn, had discerned alterations in my comportment. "He is engineering a setup for you," she cautioned after I had informed her of the nephew situation. Individuals of such inclination do not enlist familial assistance unless they intend to displace someone. I had dismissed her misgivings. After 8 years dedicated to generating income and establishing the European business, I presumed my position was impregnable. I had cultivated client associations that would be irreplaceably complex to replicate within a truncated time frame. I possessed specialized expertise regarding European markets that Gavin necessitated. I was mistaken. Unbeknownst to me, Theodore had been meticulously endeavors to undermine my client relationships. He had impressed upon Gavin that I was becoming excessively integrated and prioritizing the interests of European clients over those of the corporation. He posited that my incessant travel was excessive and that the preponderance of my responsibilities could be managed remotely by an individual based in Dallas. The Roland Garros excursion was ostensibly conceived as an acknowledgement of my achievements. Instead, it ostensibly served as Gavin's stratagem for extracting me from the nation, while they prepared my cessation of employment. Nonetheless, Gavin had committed a singular critical misjudgment. He terminated my engagement whilst I was situated adjacent to the solitary individual capable of transforming his machinations into a calamitous business reversal. I reclaimed my cellular device and re-examined Gavin's digital missives. The verbiage resonated with amplified impertinence upon re-evaluation. Individuals as inadequate as you are unworthy of triumph. The presumption was staggering. Alistair Humphrey was still engaged in observing the match, yet I could discern that his attentiveness had slightly shifted in my trajectory. He epitomized the archetype of a director who perceived every subtle nuance, and my reaction to those textual messages had not been sufficiently inconspicuous. The comprehensive magnitude of the unfolding circumstances began to coalesce within my consciousness. Gavin had not merely terminated my employment. He had subjected me to humiliation. The temporal alignment was deliberately calculated to inflict maximal detriment. Terminating my engagement whilst I was in Paris implied that I was unable to assert my defense, unable to gather documentation, and unable to communicate with clientele or colleagues prior to the dissemination of information throughout the workplace. However, as I remained seated, observing Verdasco commemorate his conquest, a metamorphosis transpired within me. The initial shock and affliction were transmuted into something of a colder and more intentional nature. Gavin had profoundly miscalculated my potential. I contemplated my associations with clientele. Novacore Industries had specifically stipulated that I remain their primary point of contact throughout the duration of the contractual commitment. Frederick Brandt, affiliated with Global Tech Enterprises, had conveyed to me the previous month that he regarded me as irreplaceable. Sophia Dubois of Unified Systems had advocated for a contractual prolongation, specifically predicated on her confidence in my oversight of their deployment. These were not merely transactional associations. They represented collaborative arrangements predicated upon 8 years of reliance, competence, and cultural comprehension. Gavin appeared to operate under the delusion that he could simply inherit these relationships through the termination of my employment and the emplacement of his nephew. He was poised to discover otherwise. I glanced once more at Alastair Humphrey. Stellaris Enterprises had been endeavoring to penetrate the American consultation marketplace for several years, yet they lacked the client associations and cultural understanding to viably contend with established firms, such as Innovatech Solutions. What if they were to unexpectedly gain admittance to both? The assemblage of spectators commenced dispersing as the trophy presentation concluded. Alastair rose and extended his limbs, then directly addressed me. "Kindly pardon my presumption," he remarked, "but you bear the countenance of an individual who has recently received some extremely disconcerting intelligence. I made a resolution that would irrevocably alter my trajectory." "Actually," I responded, rising and extending my hand, "I surmise that I have just received the most auspicious intelligence of my professional career. I am Lucas Sterling, formerly associated with Innovatech Solutions." He manifested a cordial expression and clasped my hand. "Alastair Humphrey, Stellaris Enterprises, and I suspect that the term formerly is poised to assume considerable significance." I retrieved my cellular device and disclosed Gavin's textual messages to him. Alastair perused them twice, his demeanor exhibiting progressive intrigue with each utterance. "Well," he articulated at last, "this temporal coincidence is quite fortuitous. Would you entertain the prospect of prolonging this dialogue over an evening meal? I am conversant with an exemplary restaurant situated near the Louvre." The game had only recently commenced, and Gavin possessed no awareness that he was poised to forfeit everything. By the subsequent Sunday evening, I had returned to Dallas, bearing a professional proposition from Stellaris Enterprises that surpassed my most extravagant anticipations. Alastair had explicitly conveyed his desire for me to spearhead their nascent American expansion, tendering a 35% increase in compensation and stock options that Gavin had pledged but never furnished. The arrival of Monday morning was heralded by overcast skies and the sort of chilling temperature that penetrated one's outerwear. I proceeded into the Innovatech Solutions offices for what I knew would be my definitive appearance. Gavin awaited me within the conference chamber, accompanied by Theodore and our Human Resources Director, Bethany Davies. "Lucas," Gavin addressed me as I entered, his intonation exhibiting artificial levity. "How was Paris?" "Instructive," I responded, assuming a seat opposite him. Bethany propelled a cessation packet across the tabletop. It encompassed standard severance provisions, non-compete stipulations, and the return of company property. Neither overly generous nor illicit. "I believe you will discover everything to be in order," Gavin stated. "We have determined to restructure the European sector under Theodore's command. Your services are no longer solicited." Theodore remained positioned there, manifesting a smug expression as if he had just secured a prize. He was 29 years of age, possessed a master's degree in business administration from a second-rate institution, and maintained precisely zero international business exposure. "What of my clientele?" I inquired. "They are company clientele," Gavin responded. "Theodore will be overseeing all European affiliations henceforth." I executed my signature upon the documentation without contention. Gavin appeared astonished by my acquiescence. "I must concede, Lucas, I had anticipated greater resistance from you." "This is rather refreshing. There is no justification in contesting the inevitable," I articulated, rising and extending my hand to him. "I extend my best wishes to you in the European marketplace." Unbeknownst to Gavin, I had allocated Sunday to making telephonic communications, not yet to clients, that would transpire subsequently. Rather, I had liaised with my legal counsel, examined my employment arrangements, and verified that my non-compete clause pertained solely to direct competitors within the Dallas metropolitan jurisdiction. Stellaris Enterprises was situated in London. I proceeded to clear my personal effects from my desk whilst Theodore observed from across the office. He made a deliberate point of occupying my erstwhile seating accommodation and vociferously discussing European strategy with anyone who would deign to listen. The execution was lamentable, but I permitted him his moment. By the subsequent Tuesday morning, the actual detriment commenced. Frederick Brandt from Global Tech Enterprises contacted the main office, requesting to communicate with me regarding a contractual alteration. Bethany transferred him to Theodore, who expended 15 minutes endeavoring to explicate why he now represented Frederick's primary point of contact. Frederick terminated the call and instantaneously contacted my personal cellular device. "Lucas, what is transpiring at your establishment? This juvenile individual possesses no comprehension of our agreement. There have been some alterations in management," I informed him. "I am unable to delve into specificities at this juncture, but I shall be in contact imminently." Parallel communications emanated from 3 additional clients throughout that week. Sophia Dubois was particularly forthright. "If you are no longer affiliated with Innovatech Solutions, we must promptly engage in discourse regarding our contractual arrangement." Gavin commenced experiencing panic by the subsequent Thursday. He contacted my cellular device on 6 occasions, leaving progressively desperate vocal messages pertaining to misapprehensions and impulsive resolutions. Theodore had ostensibly managed to offend 2 clients and completely mishandled a conference call with a potential prospective account. The culminating precipitating event transpired on Friday morning, when Novacor Industries transmitted a formal communication requesting the cessation of their $15 million contractual commitment due to substantial modifications in account management. Gavin appeared at my residential domicile that evening. "This is preposterous, Lucas. You are annihilating associations out of sheer spite." "I am not annihilating anything," I responded. "I am merely unavailable to rescue you from your nephew's incompetence. What is it that you desire? Augment compensation? A more esteemed title? I desire nothing from you, Gavin. You exercised your decision in Paris." He departed, bearing the countenance of an individual who had only recently apprehended that he had committed a calamitous blunder. However, it was irrevocably too late. The detriment had been inflicted, and my endeavors had only recently commenced. Saturday morning ushered in a telephonic communication from Bethany Davies. She sounded enervated. "Lucas, I require to inquire regarding something confidentially. Were you cognizant of Theodore's engagement prior to its announcement?" "I was not." "Why do you ask?" "Because I have been examining the official documentation, and certain aspects do not align." Gavin retroactively dated Theodore's employment commencement to 3 months antecedent, yet his actual initiation was merely 2 weeks prior, and his remuneration surpasses your own. This represented new information. I had operated under the presumption that Theodore's engagement was a manifestation of familial favoritism, yet Bethany was insinuating something of a more premeditated nature. "What further discoveries have you unearthed?" "Gavin has been intercepting your client emails for 6 weeks. He established a forwarding protocol that replicated everything to his personal account, and he has been informing individuals that you were contemplating resignation in any case." The circumstances became more lucid. Gavin had not terminated my engagement impulsively. He had been strategizing this for months, methodically undermining my hierarchical standing whilst preparing Theodore to assume control. The Parisian excursion was not an appreciation, but a convenient stratagem for extracting me from the nation whilst he finalized the transitional phase. Bethany proceeded. "There is more still. Gavin has been negotiating with a consulting firm situated in Berlin regarding the acquisition of our European client portfolio. He apprised them that you were unreliable and that the enterprise necessitated professional administration of international affiliations." I now comprehended. Gavin was not merely substituting me with his nephew. He was strategizing to vend the European sector to a German firm and liquidate his assets while asserting credit for the business I had cultivated. "When is this scheduled to transpire?" The preliminary accord was formalized 2 weeks prior. The full transfer is scheduled for the subsequent month. Gavin had executed this flawlessly. Terminate my engagement, install Theodore as a provisional placeholder, then vend the entirety of the operation to the German firm for substantial monetary gain. Theodore would ostensibly receive a bonus and a letter of recommendation, whilst Gavin would assume the posture of a strategic virtuoso who had successfully monetized the European expansion. There remained, however, one deficiency within his grand design: the clientele. European business ethos places a premium on interpersonal affiliations and continuity. Frederick Brandt was not amenable to accepting some arbitrarily designated German consulting firm, merely because Gavin Barclay deemed it to be a judicious course of action. Sophia Dubois would terminate her contractual obligations prior to collaborating with individuals she had never encountered. The Norwegian pharmaceutical enterprise that had been negotiating a new arrangement would withdraw instantaneously. Gavin had computed the financial worth of the client contracts, yet he had comprehensively misapprehended that which rendered those affiliations invaluable in the primary instance. I contacted Alastair Humphrey in London. Alastair, I necessitate the acceleration of our timeline. Something of considerable import is transpiring with Innovatech Solutions' European operations. What variety of something? I explicated Gavin's scheme to vend the sector to a German firm. Alastair remained silent for an extended duration. That is, in actuality, perfectly advantageous for us, he pronounced at long last. If he is strategizing to vend, it implies that he has already forfeited any aspiration of personally managing those affiliations, and should the clientele exhibit dissatisfaction with the transitional process, they will be actively pursuing alternative solutions. Precisely. How expeditiously can you mobilize? I am capable of being in London by the subsequent Wednesday. Exemplary. I shall have the legal department draft your employment agreement. And Lucas? Affirmative. Commence compiling a catalog of every client affiliation you are capable of transferring. We shall transform Gavin's master blueprint into the most munificent windfall our corporation has ever received. Gavin operated under the presumption that he was engaged in the strategy of chess, but he had unwittingly relinquished every piece on the board to his adversary. I embarked on a flight to London on Tuesday evening and expended Wednesday morning within Alastair's office, finalizing my employment agreement. The stipulated terms surpassed my wildest anticipations. Director of American Operations, considerable stake of equity, and unencumbered autonomy over client affiliations. Alastair had conducted his preliminary investigations thoroughly. Stellaris Enterprises had been endeavoring to penetrate the American marketplace for the duration of 3 years, but they lacked the requisite affiliations and cultural cognizance to viably contend with established firms. The engagement of my services addressed both deficiencies instantaneously. The timing of your emergence is remarkable, Alastair remarked as we scrutinized the contract. We have been establishing our American infrastructure for the duration of months, but we necessitated someone who possessed comprehension of both marketplaces. By the subsequent Thursday, I was making telephonic communications. Frederick Brandt was my initial point of contact. I explicated that I had aligned myself with Stellaris Enterprises and would be persisting in supporting his technology deployment from London. This is considerably superior, Frederick averred. Stellaris Enterprises maintains an exceptional standing in Europe. When may we effectuate the transfer of the contractual arrangement? I shall direct our legal team to contact you the subsequent week. Sophia Dubois was equally receptive. She had been aggravated by Theodore's deficiency in knowledge and felt assuaged to ascertain that I would persist in managing her account. Finally, an individual who comprehends our enterprise, she pronounced. Dispatch the transfer documents to me forthwith. The Norwegian pharmaceutical enterprise exercised greater circumspection, but they assented to a meeting. The potential $15 million contractual arrangement that Gavin presumed he was selling to the German firm remained, in point of fact, procurable. By the close of the business day on Friday, I had validated transfer agreements with 6 key clients, representing $46 million in contractual income. 3 additional clients desired to schedule assemblies to engage in discourse regarding the relocation of their accounts. Gavin possessed no awareness of the unfolding circumstances. Theodore was, ostensibly, persisting in endeavoring to convince clientele that he was capable of accommodating their requirements, while Gavin was finalizing particulars with the German consulting firm. The trap was ideally positioned. Monday morning ushered in a period of pandemonium within the Innovatech Solutions offices. Frederick Brandt's legal department dispatched cessation notices for 3 discrete contractual arrangements. Sophia Dubois requisitioned the immediate return of all proprietary documentation. The Norwegian pharmaceutical enterprise canceled their negotiation assembly. Gavin contacted me at 9:00 a.m. "What in the infernal region are you attempting to perpetrate, Lucas? I am now employed by Stellaris Enterprises. My clientele elected to accompany me. You are incapable of executing this. You are constrained by a non-compete agreement. I consulted with my legal counsel. Stellaris Enterprises is situated in London, not Dallas. The non-compete is not applicable to international corporations." The silence on the opposing end persisted for virtually 30 seconds. "You are annihilating the European sector." "Nay, Gavin. You annihilated it when you terminated my engagement through a digital textual missive. I am merely providing assistance to my clientele in procuring superior service." Tuesday ushered in further cessation notices. By the subsequent Wednesday, the German consulting firm was positing substantive inquiries pertaining to the valuation of acquiring a European sector devoid of any clientele. Thursday morning precipitated a further telephonic communication from Bethany Davies. "Gavin is undergoing a complete mental disintegration. The German pact is disintegrating. Theodore resigned his position yesterday, and the board is soliciting explications." What variety of explications? How we forfeited 70% of our European income within the duration of a single week. Friday afternoon, Jared communicated with an update. The Norwegian pharmaceutical enterprise is inclined to proceed forward in conjunction with us. They are tendering $18 million over the span of 3 years. Exemplary. And Lucas, I have only recently been the recipient of a telephonic communication from an individual named Bethany Davies. She articulates an interest in engaging in discourse regarding employment prospects with Stellaris Enterprises. Gavin's dominion was collapsing, and the preeminent individuals were abandoning the vessel prior to its total submersion. The individual who had designated me as inadequate was poised to apprehend the true nature of failure. The conclusive blow was delivered precisely 3 weeks following Gavin's termination of my engagement in Paris. Jared summoned me into his office bearing intelligence that rendered everything worthwhile. Innovatech Solutions Board had only recently resolved to dismiss Gavin from his capacity as regional director. Ostensibly, the forfeiture of $94 million in contractual income was deemed a dismissible offense. I experienced a muted sense of gratification, but no exuberant elation. Gavin had inflicted this upon himself through impertinence and deficient judgment. "There is more to the narrative," Jared proceeded. "Theodore Barclay is ostensibly informing individuals that you sabotaged the European sector out of malice. Some of your erstwhile colleagues are scrutinizing his version of the unfolding events. I had anticipated this. Gavin and Theodore necessitated someone to indict for their adversity, and I represented the readily apparent objective. Let me hypothesize," I pronounced. "They are asserting that I illicitly appropriated clientele." "Precisely. But here is that which they do not comprehend. Bethany Davies has been documenting everything. Email relays, retroactively dated employment records, the attempted divestiture to the German firm. She is prepared to provide testimony that Gavin had been strategizing your cessation of employment for months." The irony was unparalleled. Gavin's methodical blueprinting had generated a tangible trail of official documentation that substantiated that his actions were premeditated as opposed to impulsive. If he had merely terminated my engagement in an honest manner, he might have been capable of retaining some clientele. Instead, his dissimulation had rendered my departure as justified in the perspective of all stakeholders. What transpires now? Bethany will be initiating her employment with us the subsequent month in the capacity of European Operations Manager. Frederick Brandt is advocating for our services to 2 corporations situated in Munich, and the Norwegian Pharmaceutical Pact is expanding to encompass their subsidiary firm situated in Oslo. Gavin's textual message dispatched from Paris had incurred upon him the forfeiture of everything: his employment, his standing, and the business sector he had endeavored to surreptitiously appropriate. Simultaneously, Stellaris Enterprises had acquired a foundation in the American marketplace, commensurate with over $100 million in prospective income. Equity had been justly dispensed in a muted, professional, and comprehensive manner. 6 months subsequent to this juncture, I was perusing quarterly financial assessments in my London office when Evelyn telephoned from Dallas. "You will be utterly unable to surmise whom I encountered at the supermarket yesterday," she articulated. "Gavin." He was engaged in bagging groceries at the supermarket proximate to our erstwhile residential domicile. He appeared utterly disconsolate. I derived no gratification from Gavin's ruination. The destruction of an individual's career yields no enduring tranquility, even when they are worthy of it. However, I had gleaned valuable insights regarding fidelity, temporal synchronicity, and the significance of treating individuals with fundamental deference. Stellaris Enterprises had surpassed all anticipations. We had procured 14 key American clientele and inaugurated offices in Boston and Seattle. The Norwegian pharmaceutical contractual arrangement had evolved into a collaborative partnership that spanned across 5 nations. Most critically, I had identified a corporation that esteemed competence over organizational politics. Alistair regarded me as an equal partner, not a menace to his hierarchical authority. Our triumph represented a collaborative accomplishment, not a zero-sum rivalry. Evelyn joined me in London in the spring season. We procured a residential property in Hampstead and initiated dialogues regarding prospective progeny. For the antecedent duration of years, I experienced the sensation of constructing something permanent as opposed to merely subsisting through someone else's aspirations. The Roland Garros tournament recurred in Paris the subsequent June. Alistair procured tickets for my benefit anew, but on this occasion, I was an attendee from within the corporate hospitality suite acquired by Stellaris Enterprises. Fernando Verdasco secured his 15th French Open title that particular day. As he lifted the trophy aloft, I contemplated the transformative alterations that had transpired within my existence since the antecedent year. Occasionally, the most dire circumstance that befalls an individual can transmute into the most fortuitous event that could have potentially transpired. Gavin's textual communication had liberated me, albeit inadvertently. I never formally conveyed my appreciation to him for this benevolence, but I should have potentially entertained such a gesture.